I'm gonna put the chair near you, and I want you to take out your tampon, and you can use the chair the way you would use a toilet seat.
Okay.
I was thinking about bodies with anatomy like mine, and that they are kind of categorically considered beautiful or attractive in some way when it comes to representation, you know? Like, this is a form that people have been making pictures of for tens of thousands of years. And I was thinking about that when that's not the case. And then I started thinking about menstruation, and I thought, man, you know, when I'm bleeding, that's the time that I'm considered undesirable by a lot of people. That's kind of what I've grown up thinking, you know, and it's certainly something I'd never seen images of. And so I thought, what would it be like to make them? And for me, it was kind of this like cosmic question, you know, about this part of humanity, this connection to cycles and lineage and rhythm. And then some women came forward who were interested in that, did feel comfortable exploring that. I started making pictures, film pictures, developing them in my dark room. I shot them in a bathroom. I said, I'm gonna bring you to this bathroom that's kind of picturesque and have you take out your tampon, diva cup, whatever, and pour it in the toilet, throw it in the trash can. I'll make pictures of this, you know, do everything a little slower than normal, but once I started being granted access to all of these stories and being brought into these spaces of huge vulnerability, you know, then I realized that this is something that we're all doing together.
So how does the whole staging element of it affect you and your model? Is that something that you find to be an addition to your work, or is it something you have to work around? Yeah, I'd be interested to hear about that.
So yeah, a lot of the shots are kind of a model saying, what about this? Or just going ahead and sitting some way and me making a picture of it. And then beyond that, I might direct a little more.
Right.
So I think, yeah, the first thing that became so clear to me once I had shot 3 or 4 models was like, no series of images from each person was going to look the same.
Yeah.
Because they had their own relationship to this thing, right? And some of them were in pain, and the pictures were going to show that. Some of them were excited, and the pictures were going to show that. Some of them were scared and nervous. They were going to show that. Now I'm working on a photo book, but even more, I'm working on a documentary, talking to some of the models, but also women and other people, not just women, who maybe weren't in the photographs, but have something to say about them, a story to tell. What I sense is that there are women who feel like they are endowed with the gift of artistic creation, who want to tell this story about themselves, right? And I think what I'm really interested in is like, how do you break out into being able to tell other stories of other bodies, right? One of the women in the group said all she remembers in 6th grade, they pulled all the 5th and 6th grade girls in the cafeteria to tell them about menstruation, sexual health, I'm not sure what, but she said what she remembers is them saying, when you get your period, it's going to have a very foul odor to it.
Right.
And so you're going to need to adopt different hygiene patterns in order to cover that up, right? Like, that's what she remembers. Right. It's like, this is going to smell bad.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone smell it.
Right.
You know?
Right. But I'm wondering if you feel like you have like really faced limitations in your work in terms of who's accessing it or who's approaching you or whatever that you feel is a hindrance to your project. And if you have, like, in what ways do you think you can move beyond that?
Yeah, I definitely think that I had a reckoning moment when I started getting pushback against it. Because it was a private thing I was doing for a while. I mean, I shot photographs for a year and a half before the public saw them, you know? And then when it became public and I put images on a huge Facebook group, like of feminists, like a huge following, and got torn down, you know?
You got torn down?
Torn down. I mean, just, this is not art. What the fuck are you doing? This is not what feminism is about. During the first crowdfunding campaign I did, which is not part of this fundraising push I'm doing right now, but I posted this image, the bathtub image, the last in the 8 that I had. And I had it, I think with some words, because during that campaign I got a lot of written testimony from people who've been involved, and it got reported, which means someone I probably know. I mean, it could have been someone who knows someone I know,
right?
But, you know. And I've gotten plenty of pushback from women who have known me my whole life and normally are very supportive, but said, I can't support this, you know. Someone reported it. Facebook ended up not taking that one down. I think the only time that pushback becomes a real hindrance is when it says to one person, you shouldn't be telling your story. If you tell someone who is finding transformation through this that they're wrong for that,
right,
that's fucked up. You know, I started the project because I was reading a radical feminist text, Shulamith Firestone. It was The Dialectic of Sex. She was saying that she felt like when women are pregnant, it's a deformation of the body, and that really got me thinking, because I don't feel that way at all, but it was this kind of radical statement she had made. There was a lot in that book that I had experienced viscerally, like even about the nuclear family. Like, she fucking destroys the concept of the nuclear family. When it comes to gender, sex, bodies, all of that, there was a lot that I was like, man, I've lived that. And now she's saying it. And that's always a huge relief, right? To be like, man, someone who is more fluent than I said this, and I get it, you know? So obviously I was coming out, like, what spurred my curiosity was a very activist, a very political text. But I think I just didn't start out to start a movement.
Might this be limited in some way? What are the possible limitations of Egan being from a background, which I have no idea what your economic background is, but you are a white young woman and you are presenting this art, and feminism has oftentimes in the mainstream in the past few decades been relegated to the white and the female and the middle class or the upper class. And so what does it mean for you to be a part of this project, filming these things? Do you feel like you are coming up against certain racial or economic boundaries? Do you feel like you yourself are limited by your background? What are some of these limitations you're experiencing?
I've been aware, I won't even say I've tried to be aware, I've just been aware since the jump that I'm a white woman making these pictures and they're not all white bodies. One of the women who has been facilitating the storytelling groups, Shakana Haley, she's a doula, and she researches rites of passage. From my understanding, often...
Wait, can we pause and explain for everyone what a doula is if they don't know, maybe?
I'm not an expert, but my understanding of what a doula's role is to be with someone through, not just through the birthing, which is what a midwife, I think, tends to do, but through the whole pregnancy and then post-birth process.
So like a mentor and a supporter and a coach.
Yeah, and they're very knowledgeable about what's happening to your body in a way that a lot of us aren't, but they're with you that whole time.
Cool.
So Shakana is a doula. She also researches rites of passage among women. I think often from an Africanist tribal perspective, lens. And she's also an adjunct Spelman. And it's interesting because she showed another black woman older than her, in her 50s or 60s, that crowdfunding video I made. So the intention was to kind of go behind the images, so the conversation we're having, also let her tell her story. And Shakana showed it to someone and their response was, this feels like black female body as a prop, made by a white woman, you know?
Right.
And I think that's a very real read, you know? But on the other hand, the intention behind her not showing her face was she didn't want to. She wanted to remain anonymous. And the stories she told were not really prompted by me. I've said things like, what was it like the first shoot we had? And then she would tell a much longer story than I ever could have anticipated. So I think aside from myself being aware that I look like this and I've been raised like this and I'm making these pictures and they're not always of people who look like me, aside from that awareness, like that has been a conversation I've been having, you know? And I think what has happened so far is that women who do have different racial, cultural, economic backgrounds than me still feel like this can offer them something, and then they bring to it all of that identity and background. You know?
Where do you hope to go with it? What are the developments that have occurred? Update us and let us know how we can keep connected with what you're doing.
Okay. So the next big thing on the horizon is the Unmentionables Film Festival. It's their first year. It's in New York City. And their whole topic is menstruation. And then the storytelling groups are going to continue, which will lead into other people being part of the project in other ways. You asked what the upshot of the documentary is, and the hope is to tell a few stories over time that speak to different experience. So that's what I'm filming right now. I'll say right now, so egamarie.com
Yes.
is a good way to reach me. Also the Cunabula Facebook group. But like, honestly, I want you. If you have a story to tell, if you have a picture that you're willing to be in, a picture you make of yourself, a poem you write, and you can find me on all of those things, you know, on the web, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter.